We got Two Plane Sports here breaking down Oklahoma football. Of course, fall camp's less than a month away. And so the guy that everyone's going to be talking about and has all off season, first and foremost, is, of course, Jackson Arnold. To liken his situation to what's going on at USC with Miller Moss, and I know that some of your fan base likes to keep an eye on what's going on the West Coast there in Los Angeles because of obvious reasons. Miller Moss lights it up in a bowl game. Jackson Arnold, from a statistical standpoint, lit it up. He also turned it over 4 times, but that's the only look we have at this point. So how confident are you guys in Jackson Arnold in being the guy that he needs to be this season?
I mean, I think we're very confident. I think most of Sooner Nation is pretty darn confident. He's a guy who's a 5-star coming out. He's an Elite 11 winner. I think he showed. You mentioned the turnovers in that Arizona bowl game, and yeah, I think that's still going to happen a little bit. This is his first true year as a starter. We're going into the toughest conference in college football. I mean, at least many people think so. And then we've got, there are going to be some learning curves there, but the kid has all the talent in the world. He can run, he can throw, and then I think what's really going to benefit him, and I talk about this on our show all the time, I think this is the best supporting cast that Oklahoma has had as far as receivers and running backs go since Baker Mayfield had in 2017. I think with Nick Anderson, we saw what he did last year, 10 touchdowns as a freshman. You bring in Deion Burks out of Purdue, who lit it up at Purdue, looked great in the spring game, and I know it's a spring game. You got Jalil Farouk, you got Jaquez Petaway. I think Gavin Sawchuk showed a lot of promise last year. Javante Barnes is going to be a lot more healthy this year at running back 2 than he was last year. You bring in some transfer running backs. I think if the offensive line can hold up, and that's I'm sure a topic for later on in this chat here, but the supporting cast around him is going to be really, really solid. And I think it's obviously going to help him out a lot. I'm pretty stoked to see what JA can do here.
Yeah, Jackson's got the talent. He's proven it at the stops he's had, whether it was camps throughout high school, spring game appearances, even the little bit of time he got last year during the football season, the game against BYU where he had to come in after Dylan Gabriel got hurt towards the end there. And he did make mistakes. I think that no one can go in there and say that he was perfect and he was going to be 100% going to be one of the Heisman contenders going into his first year as a starter, like a lot of people did with Caleb Williams, and rightfully so. But he showed flashes of what he can be, and it's about cleaning up, learning as the starter for OU, and making sure that he's on pace to be able to live up to those expectations. Because he might perform well, but how he's been covered basically from the moment that he committed to the university. Many people, not just us, but other podcasts, other media members have looked at Jackson Arnold to be one of the better quarterbacks out of that recruiting class, which was loaded. You have Nico Iamaleava from Tennessee, Arch Manning, Deontay Moore. There were plenty of other guys in that 2023 recruiting class at the quarterback position that were seen as guys that were going to be the guy for the university that they played for, and Jackson was one of them. He just has to show that he can live up to that kind of level.
Yeah, to the point that was made earlier, I don't think there's any question that there is a greater depth of speed rushers, edge rushers, and then defensive tackle play in the SEC that's beyond the other conferences. And you're going to see that on a weekly basis, even from the mid to lower tier teams. You're going to see guys that can really play and have a NFL possibility. So the offensive line is completely revamped. The transfer portal was part of the equation. So where do you guys stand on the offensive line?
So that's the big question mark for, I think, all of Sooner fans and anybody who follows college football closely enough. I think we actually talked about this the other day on our show. We kind of did a offensive line breakdown for the SEC. We kind of put Oklahoma, I think we put them at 10 or 11. So, towards the bottom of the SEC, but there's one constant in Oklahoma, no matter how far you go back, as long as Bill Bedenbaugh's been there, that this offensive line has been a pretty solid core. And, they did a lot in the offseason to try to shore that up a little bit. They bring in Branson Hickman out of SMU, a guy who had 517 pass blocking attempts last year, didn't allow a sack. I think he slides in and starts there at center. You bring him back Jake Sexton, who's shown a lot of promise in his limited play time that he's had so far at Oklahoma. Guy who can play guard or tackle. I think you kind of find out where he's going to be and you throw him in there. You bring in a North Texas transfer and Fibechi Nuwahu. I always mess that name up, but he's a guy who's very familiar with Seth Luttrell, being at North Texas with him. I think he knows the offense. Jake Taylor's a guy who's been there for a while. I think, they haven't really got to play on the field a whole lot together, but they've been there together, kind of forming that sort of continuity. And they have, I think, one of the best position coaches in all of college football in Bill Bedenbaugh. I think you might see some rough patches, some growing moments early in the season, but I think, as Bill Bedenbaugh always does, by the time the season's really rolling, 5, 6, 7 games in, I think that unit will be pretty shored up, pretty solid.
Yeah, to answer your question, it really is like Brandon said. It's in Coach B we all trust, because he has put together solid units, regardless of how people feel going into a season. At the end of the day, when we get 3-4 games deep, they show that they're a pretty good unit. Now, they're not always going to be Joe Moore award winners or even finalists, but they're going to be good enough to create a good run game and give the quarterback time to help to get that play to develop more often than not. The biggest question mark to tie it into what we were talking about and with the recruiting is, how's recruiting going to be for Oklahoma at that offensive line going into the SEC, because it is really one of the bigger question marks for Oklahoma's recruiting with Coach B, because we're doing, like we're seeing this year, a lot of patchwork through the transfer portal and getting that offensive line unit put together every year, it seems like.
I do think that the offensive line position is unlike any other position, kind of much like quarterback, and that's for an obvious reason. But the offensive line, for positions, all the other positions that have multiple players playing, for a couple different reasons. I think you need talent, obviously, but I don't know that the talent is as primary an objective or priority as some other things. And the coaching, I think, at the offensive line position is critical. And that's why great offensive line coaches are valued in the sport. And also just determining the combination of the players up front is unlike any other position. If you got wide receivers, you got wide receivers. Sure, you're going to determine who's in the Z, the Y, the slot, and you're going to determine a corner may play better or closer to the boundary or something like that. That is a little bit more nuanced, but you can't always play your best 5 offensive linemen, because some of them can play multiple positions, others can't. And it's a mix and match game of determining not the best offensive linemen, but the best offensive line. And so there's an art to that. And certainly Bill Bedenbaugh is one of the best. And so a lot of development at that position for sure.
Yeah.
Talking OU, of course, much anticipated 2024 season in the SEC and all different opponents. And we're talking with Two Plain Sports, so you can catch them right here on YouTube, breaking down the Sooners as we head toward fall camp in less than a month.